In this video, I'll show you how I made a ladder style wine rack out of some old reclaimed Aussie hardwood and steel rebar. Welcome down to Woodworks. I found these two lengths of hardwood in my timber stack that were the perfect size, but they had a bit of a bow in them. So to save a lot of passes over the jointer, I used an electric plane to plane down the ends, bringing them closer to being flat. When jointing long boards like these that are longer than the table of your jointer, as the end of that board with the bow in it approaches the beginning of the infeed table, the board will lift up, giving you a not so flat surface which needs more passes to get flat. Using the planer on the ends of these boards meant they only needed 2 passes over the jointer to get flat along their entire length. And it's here that you can really see the bow in this board as it gets stuck going through the thicknesser when it gets closer to the middle. I adjusted the height of the thicknesser to the end of the board, not realising that it was much thicker in the middle. Needless to say, both boards took several passes to get the two faces parallel. I'm not sure why I don't have footage of it, but I flattened one edge on the jointer and then cleaned up the last side on the table saw, ripping the two boards to the same width. I had this piece left over from the dining table leg, so I ripped it in half, and it was going to be the top and bottom rungs to hold the stiles of the rack together. Using a clamp on my speed square at the 10-degree mark, I drew lines across the stiles where holes would be drilled for 12mm steel rebars that would hold the bottles horizontally in the rack. Each bottle would sit on 2 bars and the rack would hold 10 bottles in total. I set these at 10 degrees because the rack just leans against the wall at about that angle, but the steel rods would still have worked if I installed them square to the edge of the stiles. I wanted to try hand-cut mortises to join the 2 rungs at the top and bottom of the rack. So after marking them out, I first removed most of the waste using the drill press. And then settled in for some relaxing hand chiseling, squaring up the mortises. I thought this was going to be harder than it actually was, because I didn't know how my new set of Narex chisels would handle this super tough old hardwood, but they were great. They cut through the wood without too much effort and didn't take very long at all. The tenons on the 2 rungs were cut using the table saw, and I deliberately cut them slightly oversized and then finessed them to the perfect fit by hand. And to be honest, I think I did a really fantastic job. And we just try that for a fit. Oh, how good's that? Do the pull test, straight up and down. Now that piece of timber is really heavy. And we just do another little quick test here. Oh, dead square. I'm stoked. I then gave everything a small chamfer to soften all the hard edges and corners. I doubled up the 2 rungs in the vise to give me a wider surface to help stabilise the router. Last thing to do before assembly was to drill the holes for the steel rebars. The lengths of Rio were bought new from the big green shed, and they came pre-cut at 450mm long, which was the perfect length. So I didn't need to do anything with them, other than leave them outside for about a week to get a nice rusty patina, with the help of some daily watering, and then preserve the look by spraying them with clear varnish. I sanded the inside faces of the stiles before assembly to remove all my pencil marks, but I actually found that it was much easier to use a scraper than using the sander. A quick hand sand with the grain and this rack was ready for assembly, which by the way was looking like it was going to be a very complex glue up, with 20 individual rods to line up. My first thoughts were not to use any glue on the steel rods and just let them be captured between the 2 stiles that were going to be glued together with the top and bottom rung. But then I was concerned that the 2 stiles could bow out over time, which would be a really bad look. So I decided to use epoxy to glue them in, which would give me lots of time to complete the glue up. This turned out to be a good strategy as the glue up went together without a hitch and stress-free. Those dark spots on the timber is just terps that I used to clean up any epoxy that was on the surface of the timber. The holes in the stiles for the steel rods were just loose enough to allow me to slide each rod about halfway into the second stile, enough to line everything up before clamping everything together. For extra insurance against the stiles of the rack moving over time, I added a screw through the two centre rods only at the back of the rack, which wouldn't be seen when leant against the wall. I finished the rack with a 50-50 mix of boiled linseed oil and terps, and this job was done. Well, that's it for the wine rack. I think it turned out great. It was a fairly simple project considering, not too many components, two really, timber and steel, but it was fun to be able to use some steel or metal in a project, which I haven't done very often at all. If you're still with me, thanks for watching through to the end of the video. If you want to know what I'm up to in between videos, you can always follow me on Instagram. But until the next one, you guys all have a great day.